I was destroyed by betrayal and lies, but I transformed pain into victory and freedom. I never imagined I'd one day have the courage to tell this story, but I think the time has come. Not because it's easy to revisit everything that happened, but because I carry within me the feeling that somehow this might help someone going through something similar. My life always seemed normal, even too predictable. I had a girlfriend I loved, a twin brother I grew up sharing everything with, and a family that, despite its flaws, seemed stable. It was that typical scenario where no one from the outside would guess something rotten was growing within. Sunday lunches were filled with laughter, conversations seemed calm, but deep down, there was always this feeling that I needed to be the good one, while my brother had more room for error. I accepted this, thinking it was just the dynamics of our family. Today I see that it was the first sign that, when the ground gave way, no one would be there to catch me. At the time, I was in college, working part-time at a printing company and dreaming of an independent life. Anna, my girlfriend, was an important part of everything I envisioned for the future. We'd been together for almost 3 years, and I had no doubt we'd be together for a long time. I had plans, some naive, I admit, to get married and build a small, simple yet peaceful home, far from the chaos of the city. My relationship with my brother, Matthias, was strange. It wasn't bad, but there was competition in everything. He always had a more charismatic, more nice guy demeanor, which made my parents look at him with visible pride. I, on the other hand, needed to prove I was worth believing in. They never verbalized it clearly, but those who grow up being compared feel the difference, even in silence. On ordinary days, I didn't think much about it. I worked, studied, went out with Anna, and saw my family on weekends. Nothing seemed out of place, until I started noticing small changes in the way she treated me. They weren't arguments, but distances. Messages responded to with less enthusiasm, dates cancelled at the last minute. That sparkle in her eyes that had once been my reflection seemed to be directed somewhere else I couldn't reach. I asked her a few times if something was wrong, and the answer was always, "You're imagining it. I'm just tired." I wanted to believe. Actually, I needed to believe, because deep down, I was afraid of losing. What I thought was the foundation of my life. This fear began to grow silently. I remember one night when I dreamed I was alone, completely alone, and I woke up with my heart racing, sweating. I'm not one to believe in omens, but that feeling stuck with me like a warning. In the following days, everything seemed too strange to ignore. Matthias, who had previously kept his distance from my relationship, began asking too many questions about Anna. They weren't explicit questions, but subtle ones, like someone trying to gauge something without being noticed. One day, he even showed up at a bar where Anna and I were, without me telling him where we were. I thought it was strange, but I still swallowed my suspicions. The last thing I wanted was to create a problem between my brother and my girlfriend, two of the people I'd loved most until then. The bomb dropped one random afternoon, so abruptly, it felt like a scene from a bad movie. I went to Anna's house unannounced, something I almost never did. When I walked in, the door was ajar. I called out to her, silence. I went to the bedroom, and there she was. My girlfriend, the woman I planned to share my future with, in bed with my twin brother. There was no scream, no scene. I froze. I felt as if my body had turned to stone while my heart turned to dust. They looked at me, each with an expression I can't describe to this day. Fear, shame, maybe not even that. I left without saying a word. The way back was a blur. I didn't cry, didn't scream, I didn't hit anything. I just died inside. For the next few days, the silence was deafening. I didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to talk to anyone. I locked myself in my room, turned off my phone, and the only thing I could do was try to breathe without the lump in my throat. My head was spinning, and I relived the scene like a video on loop. I wondered how, when, why, and there was no answer. Until On the fourth day, my mother knocked on my door, her voice thick with irritation. She wanted to know why I was making a fuss and neglecting my family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not only had I been betrayed, but now it felt like the blame was somehow being placed on me. When I finally went down to talk, it felt like I'd entered a courtroom where they'd already decided the sentence before even hearing me. My father looked at me with that disappointed expression he always reserved for when I didn't live up to his expectations. And the first thing he said was, "Gabriel, you need to stop causing trouble in the family." Matthias told me everything. And his everything was a distorted version where I was the absent boyfriend, the cold one, the one who didn't pay attention, the one who pushed Anna into his arms. I wanted to laugh, but what came out was a breathless sigh, a near faint with indignation. I looked at my mother, waiting for some sign that this was absurd, but she just looked away, as if the shame were mine. It was there that I brutally understood the weight of always being the least loved. It didn't matter that I had been faithful, present, loving. It didn't matter that the betrayal had come from them. For my family, the problem was the scandal, the mess I was creating by not accepting the situation in silence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break everything. I wanted to make them see the injustice, but my voice wouldn't come. It was like drowning with no one around to throw me a rope. It was the first time I seriously considered leaving, cutting ties, disappearing. I began avoiding the house, the dinner table, any contact. There was no safe space there. Until one day, during lunch, Matthias showed up with Anna. Yes, he had the audacity to bring her to our house as if nothing had happened, as if she were just another visitor. My parents welcomed her with tense smiles, but without a hint of indignation. Inside, I was seething. At that moment, I felt something inside me break completely. It was as if the last tether that held me to that family had snapped, leaving me to fall alone into the void. It was then that I made the decision that would change everything. Leave, cut contact, disappear. I didn't make a fuss. I didn't fight. I just packed my things, put them in an old suitcase, and left without saying where. I didn't want to know anyone. I just wanted peace, just a place where I could breathe without feeling suffocated by people who claimed to love me but treated me like a burden. I rented a simple little room far away and began rebuilding my life from scratch. It hurt like hell, but for the first time in weeks, I managed to sleep through the night without waking up in despair. In the first few months alone, I had to relearn almost everything. Sleeping without someone reminding me of my mistakes, cooking my own meals, organizing my routine. It was exhausting but strangely liberating. I started working more, focusing on college, and making friends outside my old family bubble. Every small achievement, like paying my bills alone or cooking a decent meal, gave me a sense of victory I hadn't felt in years. Little by little, my self-esteem began to return. But there were still deep scars, invisible to outsiders. I smiled, but the smile carried a shadow of pain and distrust. I still loved Anna, still missed my twin brother, but that connection was marked by a wound that seemed impossible to heal. Just when I thought I could breathe, the news hit me like a punch in the gut. Someone from my family called me almost by accident, saying that Anna and Matthias were engaged. My first impulse was to laugh in disbelief, but then came the second blow. She was pregnant. Every word of that sentence sliced through me, as if I'd been torn into 1,000 pieces, and yet I had to keep standing. The possibility that this baby could be mine made me tremble. My heart wavered between anger, disbelief, fear, and a feeling that no matter how hard I tried to rebuild my life, the past still had sharp claws ready to pull me back. At that moment, I realized that running away wouldn't be enough. I couldn't simply ignore what was happening because there was a bigger truth at stake. The baby, the lies, everyone's manipulation, everything needed answers. I felt the first spark of courage ignite. It was terrifying, but I felt that if I continued to run, I would never find peace. I began contacting Adriana and Antonella, my cousin and aunt, who always showed empathy and support. They were my link to reality, reminding me that I wasn't completely alone and that there was a way to fight for justice without losing my sanity. Returning to the family circle was painful, but necessary. Every encounter with my family felt like a test of emotional endurance. I heard veiled comments, judgmental looks, but at the same time, I noticed small cracks in everyone's facade, the fear of being discovered, the anxiety of maintaining the lie, the tension that spilled over even the most controlled smiles. I, who had previously felt fragile, began to realize a strength I hadn't known existed within me. Anger and pain transformed into energy, to question, to confront, to avoid being manipulated once again. It was during this period that I began documenting everything. Conversations, messages, encounters, any detail that might reveal the truth. Each note, each piece of evidence collected was like laying a brick in the construction of my fearless future. It wasn't easy. There were days when the anguish seemed greater than I could bear. But even in moments of despair, I realized that action was my only weapon against the past. Each step brought me closer to the truth, and even if the pain didn't go away, I felt I was on the path to emotional freedom, a freedom that had previously seemed impossible to achieve. The first direct confrontation was with Matthias. I hadn't planned anything elaborate. It was simply the need to hear the truth from him, look him in the eye, and demand answers. I met him at a cafe, and the tension between us was almost palpable. He tried to disguise it, minimize it, justify it. He said he didn't know how it happened, that Anna had gotten close to him. But I could see the hidden guilt, the shame he tried to mask with empty words. Each syllable cut through me like a blade, but at the same time, it strengthened me. For the first time, I realized I didn't need anyone else to validate my pain. My own clarity about what had happened was enough. For me to begin rebuilding my life, Anna was even more difficult to confront. I met her in a park, trying to appear calm, but her eyes betrayed me. I asked about the baby, about the pregnancy, about her feelings. She hesitated, stammered, and then came the confession. The baby wasn't Matthias's. A shock ran through me. The mixture of relief and anger was overwhelming. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or just walk away. The truth I'd been searching for, the one that seemed impossible to reach, was there, naked and raw. And with it came the feeling that finally I had the tools to get my life back on track. My family reacted in predictable and painful ways. My parents, who had always judged me, now tried to justify the unjustifiable. But I was no longer afraid. With the help of Adriana and Antonella, I was able to expose not only the betrayal, but also the emotional manipulation I had suffered for years. Every conversation was a silent duel. I didn't need applause. I needed truth. And, for the first time, I felt heard, that my suffering had finally been acknowledged, even if some still wouldn't admit it. Overcoming my struggles began to take shape when I realized that the most important thing wasn't to punish or seek revenge. It was to reclaim my emotional autonomy, my right to be happy without depending on anyone's approval or forgiveness. I began to consciously invest in myself. Studies, friendships, new projects, small pleasures that I had neglected while worrying about my toxic family dynamics. Each step was painful, but liberating. I felt like life was finally in my hands, even if the past still echoed in some corners of my mind. The most significant moment of this phase was realizing that pain, no matter how intense, had a limit, and that I could overcome it. I learned to deal with injustice without being consumed by it, to feel anger without letting it define my actions. My life never returned to the way it was before, and perhaps never would, but that no longer mattered. I was building something new, solid, made by me and for me. The feeling of control, even if partial, was incredible. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the crushing weight of guilt and manipulation. In the following months, rebuilding became routine. I still thought about what happened, sometimes with pain, sometimes with anger, but always with the certainty that I couldn't allow these emotions to paralyze me. I refocused on my studies, on hobbies I'd abandoned, on friendships that strengthened me. I realized that my energy didn't need to be drained by those who didn't value my presence. Each small achievement, finishing a project, receiving a sincere compliment, laughing at something simple, was a silent victory that no one could take away from me. The sense of autonomy and self-worth was transformative, and I finally felt like I was creating a life of my own, independent of the shadows of the past. My relationship with my family changed. Irrevocably, some members continued to try to manipulate me emotionally, but I no longer allowed myself to be sucked into the same cycle. With Adriana and Antonella, I built a support network that gave me the courage to confront hypocrisy and maintain my integrity. I learned to set clear boundaries, to say no without guilt, to refuse empty excuses for behaviors I would no longer tolerate. It was painful, but liberating. For the first time, I felt that my voice carried weight, that my decisions mattered, and that I could define my own path without fear of displeasing those who never truly wanted my best interests at heart. Regarding Anna and Mateus, I chose to act prudently. It was no longer about revenge, but about clarity and justice. I sought legal and personal means to ensure that the truth about paternity was recognized and that both took responsibility for their actions. It was a slow, exhausting, and emotionally draining process, but with each small victory, I felt my self-esteem rebuild. It wasn't just about resolving the situation, but about proving to myself that I was capable of facing nearly impossible challenges without losing my essence, without becoming someone I wouldn't recognize in the mirror. Looking back today, I see that devastating episode was the catalyst for my transformation. I learned that pain, when faced with courage and strategy, can be a tool for growth. I discovered my inner strength, my ability to resist manipulation, to create healthy boundaries, and to consciously rebuild myself. My life isn't perfect. There are still moments of doubt and painful memories. But now, these memories don't define me, they strengthen me. The emotional freedom I've gained is my greatest treasure, and the feeling of controlling my own narrative is invaluable. I conclude this story by sharing what seems most important to me. Overcoming adversity isn't about erasing the past, but about learning to live despite it. It's not an instantaneous or magical process, but it's real and accessible to those who decide to face their pain with honesty and courage. I still feel scars. There are still painful memories, but today I can say I'm stronger, more aware, and freer. I discovered that the truth, however painful, has the power to liberate and transform. And above all, I learned that the greatest victory isn't over others, but over myself, over my ability to rebuild my life and my self-esteem, even after being betrayed by the people I loved most.